afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet that we share together. My name is Annette de Graaf, and this is the 100 Connected podcast, where we speak with inspiring people making a difference in education. And of course, I'm not alone. I am here with my crew. Please meet Hanneke Mackie from Basket, South Africa,
Hello.
and Cheryl Druppers from Chesa Chesa in Kenya.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. And there is Alex Shapiro from the 100 headquarters in Helsinki.
Hey, y'all.
And today we are turning the spotlight on someone who's usually behind the mic with us. It's Lindsay Stewart. She's the founder and director of Sweet Tree Arts and Sweet Tree School in Hope, Maine, the US. Hello, Lindsay.
Good morning.
So, Lindsay has been working in the arts and alternative education for over 20 years. She's originally from Scotland and she moved to the US, earned her master's in education through Lesley University, and is now doing doctoral research on how creativity and imagination support learning and well being. And if you were at the 100 Summit in Helsinki last year, you will remember the story slam that she organized, a moving moment of connection that Lindsay brought to life. And Lindsay is here today with Marlee Luehman, her colleague and close collaborator, who has been there since the beginning. Marlee has 25 years of experience in education and a background in psychology, special education, and arts integration. She brings deep care, creativity, and a strong belief in the power of learning through the arts. We're so excited to have both of them here today. And Lindsay, could you please, with your wonderful words, you have such a wonderful way with words, could you take us back to where it all began for you?
Thank you, Annette. It's really fun to be on the other side of your introductions. Where Sweet Tree began it's always a long story. But I've told the overview, which is I live in this lovely town called Hope, and it's a small community, rural Maine. And when I moved here and thought I would raise my children here and start a family, I thought, what is it that I can do to contribute to this small town? And I had always worked in education and been passionate about that. And I had gone through a variety of experiences that finally led me to open up a community arts center. Before that, I'd been working in local libraries and a variety of different schools and working with a whole variety of different populations in educational settings. You know, it's actually a bit of a tough way to start the story, which is why I'm faltering a little bit. Happened within our community at the time was quite an intense mental health crisis. And there had been a number of suicides at our local high school. And that was really a catalyst for me to commit to my community. And I had, at that moment, been asked to be involved in some after school programming to help kids connect from these rural towns before they move into the high school. And it was a beautiful program. It was well funded. I was absolutely honored to be very simply the drawing instructor. And that practice of building skills and bringing kids together and allowing them to see their worth through their skill building was at the heart of the program. And so my role at the time was that. And then there were others who would create programming that would be in farmhands or martial arts or just a whole variety of wonderfully nourishing programs. And so over time, that we really saw an impact of that program. And over time, the funding sort of went away. And many of us who'd been involved were very passionate about that work. And so that was sort of before Sweet Tree. And then many of us decided we would start our own programs to nourish our own communities, to kind of keep what we could alive based on the training, based on the impact of that work. And so with that said, I had this incredible privilege to be able to sit in a moment and say, what are the skills that I have? What's the education I have in order to contribute use my privilege in that moment? I had a master's in education. I was able-bodied. I was like very capable to be able to make a contribution. And so I started a community arts center, and that was focused on bringing kids together after school, a variety of programming. But very, very soon after, this school was born. And I remember really clearly families coming to me and saying, well, what do you think about more programming in the daytime? And what do you think about this? And I said, well, look, can you give us 10 years? We've got important work to do right now. Just give me a bit of time. Maybe that could happen. But it literally happened like the year after the Art Centre opened. And that's the moment I'm going to invite Marlee into to talk about her story a little bit, because that's the moment where I really needed to lean on support and friendship and all of the things that allow a school to grow out of a community. Marlee, how did you get involved?
Okay. I had also moved to Hope, Maine, right around the time that Lindsay was starting this little school. And I was just settling in with my daughter. And I had been in education before having my daughter and had taken just a tiny break after having her. So it had been, I don't know, maybe 2 years since I had been in education. And I had previously taught in the public schools as a special educator and had also taught in child development services, which works with infants and toddlers and early childhood development and going into the homes and teaching parents and working with young children. And I was having a hard time doing that again with my own little girl, just because it felt a little too close, the situations I was seeing and raising my own daughter. So I wanted to get back into education, and not really full time because I still wanted to be able to be with my young daughter. And I came home one day and there was a note on my counter in my kitchen. And it was from Lindsay, and it said, I'm starting a small school and I'm looking for a part-time math teacher. Would you be interested? And I was, you know, I was interested. And so
The
go ahead.
reason is because you were always out in the world dancing or doing something
I
wonderful. You were never home.
True.
The number of times I thought it would be better to have this conversation in person, but I was really running out of time. And so
Yeah, I
I
wasn't home.
walked over to your house and
Yes.
left.
And so I talked to Lindsay after this, obviously, and started working at the school about maybe 2 hours a week that first year. I came in for a couple of hours a week, taught a math class to, I don't know how many kids there were, 6 or 7 maybe that first year. And and I've been involved ever since. So my role grew and grew, and our collaboration just continued, and it's really been a magical journey. I've really learned so much about my own education and parenting and teaching and community. And I feel like my life is full and nourished because I've been a part of this little school and this community. So I'm really grateful.
I want to hear what you learned.
What I learned, I learned I learned a lot about what I wanted to unlearn from my own educational experience, which was very traditional. We didn't have a lot of opportunities where I grew up. I grew up in a very rural area of New York State, which not a lot of people know about because it's all city or upstate, which I grew up in Western New York, and went through the traditional school system and did very well, and learned how to be a good girl and how to get good grades and how to do what I was supposed to do. And it was a lot of extrinsic motivation. I was working for the grade. I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was on the soccer team because that's what you did. Uh, I feel like after being at Sweet Tree and seeing how education can be and how you can learn how to craft a life in a creative way, it's it's just been an interesting journey because I feel like I didn't learn the skills that these children are learning now. I was motivated by the grade and other people's opinions of me, and just realizing that and I don't know, coming through that and trying to unlearn that has been an interesting process in my adult life. And I've just been so appreciative to see my daughter went to Sweet Tree, and just to see how she navigates the world is really a beautiful thing. And so I don't feel like I've lost. I mean, I guess I feel a little bit like I've lost some time in my life. But I was very fortunate. I mean, of course, I was fortunate and privileged in so many ways, just even being in the community I was in. I don't want to sound like I'm not appreciative of what I had, because I know I had so much more than so many people. My family was amazing, and, my parents were great. But just looking at the education system separately from that, I can see how the learning can be so different, and how that can manifest in your confidence and in your communication and in your interactions and in every way that you show up in your life. I guess those are some things I learned, if that answers that question.
I think we're getting so curious because, of course, we know a little bit about Sweet Tree Arts, but you mentioned, right, creativity, Sweet Tree Arts, community, but also something that is different in your approach to education. So can you take us through what Sweet Tree Arts really stands for, and what is that school, and what is the community that you're building? And I think we'll have so many more questions after this, but I think all of us listening are
When I
curious
think
what
of
Sweet Tree Arts is all about.
teaching at when I think of teaching at Sweet Tree and learning at Sweet Tree, because it all happens all at the same time, I really think about connection. And that's so important to me in all areas of my life. So I think that connection that can happen when you're working in the artistic process together is so deep and so real that everything else kind of happens from there, from that connection that you're making with the other people and with yourself. So I think that's where it starts. And through that connection, you can communicate in an authentic way. You can hold the space for others to be who they are. You can see the expression that others are, communicating in their art and in the process, and different perspectives. And there's just like the space to, I don't know, to be in that together, and to be, I don't know. It's a hard thing to talk about, like what happens there. And
That's
I
a
didn't really,
wonderful experience, right?
yeah. I don't know if you want to jump in, Lindsay, at all. I mean, that's what it is for me. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, we've worked a lot actually recently to define our mission. And I think, that is really relevant because we have been very much an organic, emerging school serving our community as the needs arise. And that's always been how we've worked. And the current mission is cultivating community together through creativity, compassion, curiosity, and critical thinking. And all of those things are so embedded within an arts-based practice, within this idea that it's emerging and iterative, and that it's something we're going to do side by side, multiple thinking, multiple perspectives, so all those pieces are embedded within that practice. And it is really interesting because it's the largest sort of block for us, language, because of this embodied experience of the arts, which is why we get into these difficult conversations of trying to explain what happens when you're in flow, or when you are all riffing off one another, right? And so it is just, that's the piece that we're constantly working on, of telling our story and trying to share all the pieces that come together to make a very high cognitive way of being for all of us. It's incredibly joyful because it's just full of energy and action and all of those pieces that one is searching for in education.
It sounds so inspirational, and I love the story as you tell it, Marlee and Lindsay, about how you had to go leave a note, which just makes it sound like it was 1947 and there was no phone or no email. And I just love that because it speaks back to your value So just for the sake of giving us some context, I'm sure it wasn't 1947. How old is the school? Tell us a little bit of data information. How old is the school? The age range of the children that you see? What grades we're looking at? And also something I'm quite interested in is if you could just paint us a picture of what day-to-day life looks like. How is it the same and how is it different to what our listeners might be imagining school should be?
Okay, how about I'll share how it started and you can do the day because you're brilliant at that part.
Okay.
So it's let's see, 2012. And actually, what I didn't tell you is that like every day I would drive past this house that was in the center of Hope, and it was sort of sinking into the ground and it was not too well cared for. And
That was not my house.
no, it wasn't your house. But that became Sweet Tree. And my partner at the time was incredibly gifted and talented and a visionary. And he was like, we could take this project on, let's do it. And so we took down this old house, literally like piece by piece. And then that became something new somewhere else. And we enlisted friends who were starting their own timber frame business. And they said, we'd love to help. And we put up two new buildings on the corner of Hope. And it was we're talking about like there was a bit of a renaissance that happened in Hope. And there's another piece of this story that I do need to share, which is at the time my brother came to visit and he fell in love with this old general store, which was also needing some TLC. So he jumped in, took that on, and kind of reinvigorated the community. So together at the time, I was sort of quietly doing this behind the scenes schoolwork, and he's Mr. Charismatic, like, and he really did bring energy back into Hope, which was amazing. But listen, I want some credit because it was my idea. Anyway, so these two things were happening at the same time. And so the school, it's important, I think, that we know the structure of that. And there's some real logistics that happened within that decision to start a school. And so once the space was there, that's when people really began to like envision what it could be for them. And so, like I said, we were a community arts centre and we continue to do that work now, but it has got less and less because the school's really become the heart of the programme. So in 2014, I think the school began officially. That's probably when I left Marlee the note. And there were others that I had more traditionally invited to be a part of the programme. Currently, it's a kindergarten through 8th grade program. And when we first started, it was going to be K4. That was it. Absolutely no middle school. And then we just have kept growing the program. So what's it like day to day?
So yeah, we have about 40 students now, 40 learners, maybe, I don't know, 11, 14 staff. Most of them, kind of come and go. And there's a few who are full time. And our K2 program is in one building right now. And our 3 through 8th grade is in another building. And the groups kind of shift and change depending on the numbers in the groups and the staffing. But typically we work in 3 groups, sort of the K2 group, then maybe like a 3-4 group and a 5-8 group. But the groups shift a lot during the day. So it's multi-age, and we think about the social needs of the learners, the academic needs of the learners, and the emotional, social emotional needs, all of that when we're doing the groupings. So we might have particular learners in a group because we feel like they are great leaders and will inspire others. And then we might have those other learners, those learners in a different group in a different time so that they are inspired by somebody else. So we're constantly shifting the groups around throughout the day, but they do remain consistent enough that the kids know they have math right now and this is who they'll be with, and they have humanities now and that's who they'll be with. So there's enough, structure and flexibility that they're getting a nice balance of both. In the morning, we gather in a morning circle. It's really important that we start the day that way so that everybody feels a sense of belonging, that this is their place and that they're necessary to the group. And I'm always stressing, hearing everybody's name in the morning and making eye contact when we say good morning. So we practice that And then we head to what we call advisory, which is a bit of a smaller group where it's kind of a mindfulness practice almost in advisory. We might do some observational drawing or go for a walk or discuss a concept or a question. And I think that helps the group connect in a deeper way first thing in the morning and kind of arrive and be able to share where they're at. And we get a sense of, did this child have a difficult morning, or are they showing up rested and, curious? So you get a real sense of that in advisory. And then we go into our morning blocks, which are more sort of academic skills based. We have math, humanities, science, and they rotate through those blocks. And then we have lunch and recess in the middle of the day. And in the afternoon, we have more kind of an elective feel. So they might go to Tinker, which is our wood shop, who run by an amazing, I don't know, inventor. I call him an inventor, but I guess he's an engineer. So we have an amazing woodworking shop where the tools are all, none of them are powered by electricity. We have bicycle saws and hand tools. So they create their own projects. We have a greenhouse where
You need to know they've built boats and they've built buildings and they've built all sorts of wonderful things there.
yes, some very functional, some more whimsical. And then the greenhouse, they grow greens and gather data. And we might offer a visual arts elective or a hiking elective or martial arts. It depends on the season. It depends on who is, staffed at the school during that time. So that rotates and fluctuates throughout the school year and throughout the season and year to year, kind of the flow of the day.
Wow. Trigger warning for this episode. Don't visit Hope Maine. You'll never leave. It sounds amazing.
But
Sounds wonderful.
this is an important part. And I think I actually want to kind of dive in a little deeper with that, because I think that, yes, this is an independent school and we have incredible freedoms. And as you know, what I love to remind us is that it doesn't matter how idealistic you create your culture or your environment if you have such capacity and such privilege. There are all the same human problems inside every school, regardless of and I think that that's really relevant, because I think what it shows us as we innovate and as we develop and we change just a tiny bit our educational models, it reminds us, it's back to mental health. It's back to trauma that can come into our home in any moment and doesn't have any container of, there's no trauma is a part of everybody's lives at any moment, right? And that's a human thing that we share. And it's got a broad term and people are talking a lot about it. And at the same time, I think that it really helps us break down a lot of the social constructs that have just held us tight and not allowed us to make the changes that we need to. And so when we can create environments where we can be human together and we can continue to push those biases, push those questions, and rethink what it is to learn together. And then when we can see, those things aren't here, that means we can't say it's because of this and we can't say it's because of that. It means we have to dig deeper, right? We have to dig deeper into what it is to connect with one another, to build resilience. And so all of those things, I think, when I get into these conversations, be it public or private or this or that, we're all doing important work and we all have to support one another through that work and stay open and curious to it. It's back to that piece, right? And so it feels idyllic, it feels joyful, but there is always within any human interaction, right, both joy and sorrow, and you choose to accept both together or you choose to stay in one of those places, right? And so it's in acceptance of those multiple truths that I think we begin to really make the changes that that we're not afraid of those conversations, right?
Want to have that conversation, if you're a parent and you're curious about how is the school of my children taking care of their mental health, of their mental well-being, right? Because you're doing such an amazing thing. So many people are not maybe ready to have that discussion or that conversation about like what is it that you're doing at your school. Like, of course, that's what we're doing at our school, and the conversation about mental health is maybe like during a mental health week or like one lesson per hour. So it's like, yeah, it's scheduled. We're doing that, right? So there's evidence of us taking care of mental health, but are you really? But asking that question, stop that question, are you really? That is maybe not a good question to ask. So do you have any like practical tips maybe? So for schools, but also for parents, for educators at schools, for school leaders, how can you embrace and include the focus on mental health in a school environment, like in maybe easy baby steps that you can take so you can not just like tick off a box like we're doing that, but really making a difference with maybe small steps?
I will offer the words of my daughter, who, when asked how the school prepared her for her next step, moving from this culture that really focused on creativity and compassion um, and building connections with one another. And when she was asked what it was um, that helped her, or no, parents asked, what do I need to know? So it's similar to what you're saying. And she said to them at 15, she said, trust your child and trust yourself. And I thought it was just the most beautiful offering, because that in itself obviously can be a very difficult thing to do for a whole variety of reasons. But I was reminded of how actually storytelling has allowed me to do that work, how the arts has built that foundation and that practice for me. When I show up and I look at the audience, if I have a story to tell, and I know they want to hear a good story, I know they want to support me, I trust that they're going to be with me on my journey, my story is tenfold better. If I show up someday and I can't get that, I can't find that, and it happens to all of us, right? Then I can't look out there and say, not that I do this storytelling all the time, I'm mostly in the classroom, but it's the same for my students. If I show up and I trust that they're with me, the journey is so much richer. So I offer that. I offer, even if you don't feel it in the moment, search for it and believe in it and build that practice. And you build an environment that allows you to make the leaps, that then allows others to make the leaps as you go. So that's one thing.
But what I hear you say, Lindsay, is kind of just saying that it isn't, I was of course like joking and being complimentary to say it sounds so idyllic and so perfect. And what I kind of hear you say is that it's human and it is equally beautiful or equally light as it is dark, and it is equally happy as it is unhappy, and it is just beautifully human. And I really like that way of looking at life, is that we're not looking for this false, always happiness, but to be human, and especially in an education environment, is to be okay with both the light and the dark, the up and the down, the good and the bad, and into the deeper acceptance of both of that sides and shades of our humanity, of our flaws, of our growth, of our mental health. That's the aim. It's not for making it look like a sitcom necessarily. And I really like that. I think that's a lesson in life that I hold on to a lot, is that it's an illusion, toxic positivity, and like everything's always perfect. It's not what we're aiming for. It's more aiming for human honesty. We need both sides, right? The good and the bad.
I think being able to hold the space for that and having a community that can, be in that together, and slowing down so that there is space to feel. I think sometimes there's so much to do and so much to accomplish that we're rushing, and we can't even feel what we're feeling. And so I think having the opportunity to just slow things down and be present and aware is helpful.
And I think the
Mm.
other, Annetta, thinking more about, I guess, supports is, really we talk a lot about resilience. And what resilience means to me is reflection and relationships. And those are the things that I rely on most when it's difficult to know which way to turn. And I think we think sometimes resilience is toughing it out and getting through hard things, but it's really leaning on one another and then knowing you have that, and reflecting upon your experience. And then that's what allows you to kind of keep moving forward. So I feel incredibly grateful to show up every day in a community with other educators who work out of that space. And it's a very positive way. If we don't, we're in teams, we have systems to tag out. We say family first. If you need to be home with your child who may not be, or, family that's, we've created a system too within a culture to support the educators with it to do their best work as best we can. And so that's another important part of the Sweet Trees story.
Yeah, it's an amazing adult community we get to work with.
One of the things I've been always struck by in conversations with you, Lindsay, is how you are dedicated to bringing the research side of arts forward. And I think that listeners of the podcast have heard over and over. Lindsay comes with names. She comes ready and equipped with theories and philosophies and real research. And as Annette said, you're also pursuing your own studies right now. I want to know, what are the most foundational pieces of research that have informed how Sweet Tree works? And also, how do you weave your understanding of what science says arts can do into how you think about building the kinds of humans that Marlee was talking about? She was reflecting so warmly about how this school has helped her daughter become somebody that sounds like maybe is operating better in the world than many of us. So how does that come in? And how are you thinking about research alongside the students that you're learning with every day?
Thank you for that question. I get rather excited about that. I've actually just created a data collection tool, which I'm piloting and working on to allow both children and teachers to reflect on how creativity is seen in their lives, I guess, or within the context of a classroom. And so I have looked deeply at many of the creative theories that have been proposed. And I'm, also wildly inspired by neurobiology and the work of Bruce Perry and Dan Siegel and feminist theory, bell hooks, and working out of a place of love and care and support. And Elliot Eisner is just an incredible educator, creative to read more of. So there are many that have inspired this work, but and there are many doing this work globally right now. I mean, I'm just sharing emails with other researchers around, passing this tool around, saying, "What do you think?" And it's just wonderful to be in that community as well. So there's a long, long list, but it's a reminder that many are thinking this way about how creativity and imagination bolsters these skills of intrinsic motivation or resilience. What is it about the arts that does that? I always say it's like exercise for the brain. I do get quite excited about brain science, and that leads us to knowing if our emotions take over our bodies, then we can't get to executive function. We can't get to, and we talked about this with Sonal and Protsahan, and knowing when we understand in trauma environments what happens to the brain, it helps us understand what happens, it should be nurtured in all environments, right? So we need to know those extremes in order for us to build awareness of how to best cultivate these environments for our wonderful children. And so it's that knowing on the edges, I think, that really can inform our practice and allow us to, build those blocks for our schools. So that's a yes and conversation. I'd be happy to always share resources with anyone interested. But there are wonderful people doing incredible work all around the world. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. In my own experience in the classroom too, with language education, one of the theories that I really believe in is the affective filter, which means that as soon as you're stressed out, it shunts the learning into a different part of the brain because we enter these fight or flight modes. And so you might be able to do something kind of a high stress version, but it's not as durable. It can't really lend itself as well. But it's always interesting to hear how even often in academia, we think of these things in these big, broad strokes, but you're doing something in hope. And I think that that's another thread I want to pick up on. At HundrED, we're always talking about the most impactful and scalable solutions. One thing that makes Lindsay a little bit different from the rest of the connection committee that's here is that Lindsay is a HundrED ambassador, hasn't been selected. Sweet Tree has not been selected as part of the global collection. And I wonder if that, how does that play for you? Because I think that the work that you do is incredibly impactful. There's no question about it, right? But how does scale factor in for you? How do you think about scale? Are you scaling down to go deeper into the individual child? Or does scale mean trying to help affect more children in the world? What does that mean? I'd love, especially Marlee, to get your input on this too, as somebody who's working with the students every day. But what does that mean for you to be part of HundrED in this way?
Well, I think it's funny. I can directly answer that question. When I learned about HundrED, and I remiss to have not brought into the conversation RG Nestor, who was also was an ambassador within the HundrED community. And the two of us had been working together. She helped develop the middle school, was a very important part of the Sweet Tree story. And when we learned about HundrED, we had recently been working with a school in Malawi. And we'd been invited there to bring the arts and just support the teachers through a teacher workshop. It seemed like a very simple ask, but it was a very exciting ask for us. So we had that opportunity. And then afterwards, we really wanted to share the impact of that work because it was so powerful for us. We learned so much. And so we found HundrED and sort of shared that work. And although we knew it wasn't an innovation, because I think what the arts is doing is really, it's about best practices, right? So you can't necessarily, I can't claim that Sweet Tree is this amazing innovation. We stand on the shoulders of giants who have done this incredible work, and we're like putting the pieces together and looking closely at curriculums that we found in HundrED, and we're constantly inspired to innovate ourselves. But it isn't an innovation. And I think that schools can't necessarily be packaged. And so that said, my role as an ambassador has been one of just wonderful delights, meeting wonderful people, and also getting to review all the wonderful innovations that are come through. That has propelled me forward. That has been a real gift. But with that too, although Sweet Tree is small and we can care for about 40 students, our impact is we do have a ripple effect. I now, we worked with schools in a whole variety of settings, locally and globally. And so it has an organic manner of just inspiring and taking off. So the energy is growing and spreading. And, so we know what we can do well at home, in hope, and what that caring capacity is. But we are always willing to share and see who will might need support to start a program, or, need some of the arts to invigorate their own practice as well.
That's really beautiful and so important to know for our community that when we talk about scale and impact, it can look really different for different organizations that are working in different ways. There's so many models that are going to work contextually based on who you are trying to meet. Thank you.
I love your quote or your statement on your website that says, roots in the community, branches to the entire world. That feels so safe and comforting. And I hear you when you say that you can't claim to innovate something like the arts, or like as an innovation, because it is such a global and such a human thing. And there are parts of me, the work that I do sits closely to the work that you do with our drama, dance, and singing programs across South Africa. And I hear you speak about holding it intimately the way you are. And there is something with our intense aim to reach a lot of people that becomes difficult to hold that space that I am sensing so much in what is said and not said. Like, as my first comment in this podcast was, it's also like the way when Marlee speaks, she creates a lot of space to reflect, and she's not rushed, and I can feel that's part of your identity. And I just want a part of that because I'm a stressed out entrepreneur and I'm trying to reach the whole world, and I'm on the other end of that coin, and I am inspired,
I was like, this is the grounding force of,
Yeah.
and she's very
Yeah.
much.
But I think it's all a balance. We
Yeah.
need each other. We need it all because we can't encompass all personalities in ourselves. So I'm not the person who's going to go out and affect the masses all at once anyway, but some people can do that.
But I've been trying to
Yeah.
affect the masses and it's made me a little bit cuckoo. So maybe I'm wrong. You know what I mean?
All right. I
Yeah.
think it's the long game. I look at it like the long game, and especially when we're raising children as well, you can't see the
Yeah.
long-term effect. And in the moment, it's us really trying to look around corners, and that's that piece of trust again, trust that you have what you need in that moment. And I didn't even mention the importance of Reggio, but Reggio is a huge informant of our work. And so
Beautiful.
that grounding allows us to consider the child, center the child, learn to listen. And what that means is not just blindly going ahead with what you hear. It's about the time that's necessary to respond with all the things we bring to the table too. So it's this collaborative. I keep using that word as a new one. I've made it up. I don't think it exists. So collaborative process. It's just like more collaboration. Like I want more. Allows us, gives us permission to keep learning. I mean, it's really simple. So much of the arts is simplicity. It's about saying, draw this one thing and see where it takes you. It's about show me a small movement that helps me know what you understand. And that in itself is just such a gift that could never be packaged, right? That's not an innovation. That's a human quality that we have. And so it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be turned into something else.
Okay, so it's not an innovation, but you are such an inspiration. My goodness. So thank you, Lindsay and Marlee. We are going to go to the last question, and I want to hear from both of you, each one of you separately. What is your dream for the future of education? Marlee, can you start? It's a big
My
question.
dream, yeah. My dream for the future of education. I guess that people get what they need and can share who they are, who they want to be, and find some connection and guidance to go there. And that it happened in a kind and gentle way.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you, Marlee and Lindsay. We want to hear from you now.
Gosh, many dreams, but perhaps for one another to be seen and heard on our journeys and to have the capacity to make change along that journey and know that our identity shift, our learning shifts, and that it's a constantly to really accept that evolving process of human development.
Wow, Lindsay, that sounds like a poem. Thank you so much for that. This whole conversation felt like a warm hug, and I hope the listeners felt that too. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today.